Before I started painting all of the interior parts, I did sand them down with 600 grit just to get them ready for the primer to stick to them, and more specifically for the masking tape later on some of the pieces, not to rip off all of the paint and have it stick nicely to the parts. I then moved on to applying a couple light coats of gray primer from Tamiya. This is the liquid surface primer. I did thin it down with a bit of lacquer thinners. I have no idea on the exact ratio, as I simply just keep adding thinners to the mixture until I'm fully satisfied with the thinness and the way it sprays out of my airbrush. In the last episode, I did ask you guys what you wanted to see for the interior color. My suggestion was a white or a cream, or maybe even a very light gray. And some suggestions came back as blue, just simply go with black to hide it and just focus on the exterior color. But I kind of didn't want to have the exterior color be the only special thing about this build. I wanted the interior to have a little pop to it as well. And although the blue would be really cool, I don't really think it suits super well with the orange. And again, it is a bit of a hidden color once all of the interior is built into the chassis, and of course with the body on top of it. So I decided to go with my original plan, and that is a light cream. I didn't go for white, as that would be a bit too bright, but just chose for a racing white, which is basically just cream. I then applied it in a couple light coats until I was satisfied with the way that it was covered and could start masking off some of the door panels, as I simply just wanted the inner pieces to be in that racing white and the rest to be done in a black. Same was for the seats. The front and the bottom were painted in the racing white, and then it was masked off for the rear to be painted black. After I removed all of the masking tape, I did go over all of the interior parts with a flat clear coat just to tone it down a bit, as the racing white dries up pretty glossy and not a really nice matte leather look, so a matte clear coat took care of that. In the meantime, I also sprayed some flat clear coat onto the bottom, or at least the base plate. That is also the base for the interior, and added some flocking into the paint while it was still wet to use it as a glue. A couple small photo etch pieces were also glued in place, specifically for the pedals, some pieces in the dashboard for behind the gauge cluster, and also some mesh pieces for the grills on top of the speakers in the door cards. On the interior for the seats, both front and rear, there were some decals applied by the kit, or in the kit rather, that were some sort of texturized decal, maybe even a perforated look, and since I went for a nice white light interior, I figured these would be a really cool touch to add onto them. And after putting them in place, I did notice that the decal was again rather glossy, and now that I've toned down the rest of the interior with the matte clear, that of course doesn't really match together all that nicely, so I just gave it a nice coat of flat clear again, but then to combine the shades and tones of the seats and the decals to make them both flat. Now, since a lot of details are added onto the decal sheet, I first started applying all of the decals just to be absolutely sure that I wasn't painting anything that didn't need painting, but there was already a decal for it. So first of all the decals, and then later on I will be adding even more details with a small brush and some paints. There was one small decal missing on the seats, and that was done on purpose, as that actually did need to stay gloss, and that is the small M4 logo in the backrest. So the rest of the seat was clear coated with a flat clear, and that one just remained the glossy clear that is already on the decal. I could then move on to adding some of the additional decals and details that I spoke about earlier, but then with a brush instead of just using the decals, as there are not decals for every single detail that needs to be added. Most specifically, the silver trim pieces that need to go around all of the vents, I just painted them on with a brush very carefully with the smallest brush that I had and also the smallest amount of paint. And I did need to do a couple of touch-ups as some of the brush strokes were a bit too aggressive and left a big fat white stripe of paint that didn't need to be there, so that it was covered up with some flat black and a small brush again. And now with all of the decals and detail painting done, I could move on to the assembly. Now not all of this is actually glued in place, but most of it is. Apart from the rear seats, the dashboard and the door panels, the rest is all glued in place already. Those rear seats, the door panels and the dashboard actually need to be glued to the body prior to putting the rest of the interior in, but since I'm focusing on the interior in this video, I do want to give you a completed look of what the interior looks like assembled all together without having the body on top of it already. In the kit you will also find a small piece of seatbelt material in black. I decided to add that and also use the seatbelt buckles that were also supplied in the kit, just gluing that in place with a bit of super glue. All of the parts that are already on the interior base are glued on, and like I said, the rear seat, the dashboard and the door panels are just dry fitted into place to give you an overlook of the interior. These will eventually be glued into the inside of the body, and then the rest of the interior will be slid in from underneath, but just for the purpose of having a finished interior, I decided to put them all together for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're interested in purchasing one of these kits, I will be leaving a link down to the Facebook group of PZY Model, where you can just message the owner of the page and he will help you out to buy the kit if you're interested. Also, thank you very much to all my channel members and Patreon supporters for helping the channel out over all of these years. If you're interested in becoming a channel member or patron and helping the channel out financially a little bit, there will be links in the description down below and it will be much appreciated. Thank you guys, and see you next time.